Let's discuss some issues around the commodity space now. Of course, beginning with the currency that we use. We saw appreciation yesterday on the Naira, 0.45%, but of course, we're still hanging on the 1,600. A lot of people have called this stability, but I wonder. Let's speak with Senior Associate Senior Manager, Financial Derivatives Company, Dumebi. Hi, Dumebi. Good morning. Good to have you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I'm happy to be here.
Me too. So are you happy with the Naira? We've seen it doing under 1,006.
Yeah.
Well, they say that's our new normal. We should just take it.
Yeah.
Or is there any hope of having a bigger value of the Naira?
So I think for now, we can just retain our expectations around where the Naira is currently trading, and rightfully so, simply because we do know that on the side of the CBN, we know that they're going to do all they can to ensure that the Naira is stable at around that level. We've seen a lot of market activity from the central bank. We're also seeing like heavy market participation from FPIs as well in the NFM window. So we do expect that some of the transparency that we're seeing will continually support the Naira. There are risks that have impacted the Naira over the last couple of days and last couple of weeks. One of it has been speculation because of how reserves have been bleeding, and the fast rate of depletion is causing some concern in the market, but we do think
Where is it bleeding to? So at first we used to really know when the CBN intervenes, so we could connect it and say, oh, the reserve is dropping because of this intervention. But these days it doesn't seem like we really know that. We just see the reserve is dropping, and of course that's why more people will be worried about it.
So I would say, to an extent, we do know when the CBN is participating in the forex market. We have information on that. The other aspect of it is we do know that to an extent we've seen some level of debt servicing obligations come up, and to an extent that might have been a reason for that. But more importantly, we haven't seen a substantial increase in oil receipts, and one of the reasons for that is we've seen oil prices trend low, and we've also seen a lot of challenges with our oil production.
Yeah, because we also saw a drop. Our last number there was a drop.
Exactly. So to an extent, when we see increased activities from the central bank and we're not seeing significant inflows into our reserves, we match it to say, okay, most likely these are the
but should it be most
issues.
likely? Shouldn't we be able to like directly connect and say, oh, okay, there's some debt responsibilities being taken care of, that's why we see this, I think that will give people more confidence to say, well, we understand what's going on, it's being taken. Like I remember when the CBN came up and they were determined to deal with our backlog, and so everybody knew it's because they are dealing with this, and some people even applauded it at the end of the day.
I mean, I think that just speaks to transparency from official authorities, and it's something that we do think that most government authorities, especially on the fiscal side, will need to do a lot more so that people are more sensitized on the activities that are going on in the economy. From the Ministry of the Economy to the Ministry of Finance to the Debt Management Office, we are already seeing a lot of those communications happen. What we just need is for them to happen a lot more, and those conversations happening in more nuanced, positions where not only stakeholders are involved in those conversations, but the general public is also aware. So I think that's just one of the things that might need to happen a lot more, so that people are aware of what exactly is going on. Because to be very honest, investors are aware of what is going on in the Nigerian economy. Stakeholders are aware of what is going on in the Nigerian economy. Key economic agents are aware. So they make their business decisions and information based on all of that.
So is it that Nigerians are not looking for information at the right place? Or
let's be very honest, someone who is looking for food does not really care about what the reserves are saying, right? So
but the reserve will eventually affect the supply and pricing of your food.
I believe that's why we are here, to have these conversations and ensure that people are aware of these things that are going on, because the information has to trickle down, and you're very right about that. And it just means a lot more needs to be done so that at least the common man can understand what exactly is going on in the economy. When you also think about it, it's somewhat how a lot of people don't see how politics also intertwines with the economy, and how that eventually trickles down to what they're able to buy in the domestic markets, right? So the more people learn and more people understand understand these issues and these economic
and the connections.
trends and the connections to how it affects them, I think the more understanding and the more informed they will be. So the job is obviously on people like myself and you, and obviously the people at the helm of affairs, to ensure that the general public are aware of what exactly is going on at the top, so they understand the connection and how it affects them.
So talking about being aware, obviously there's the talk about crude for Naira. That's a big one now.
Yeah.
We hear the initial agreement with Dangote expires on the last day of this month.
Yeah.
Oh, on Monday we learned there was going to be a conversation.
Yeah.
The committee chairman had sent a release like 2 weeks ago to say, oh, the talks are on. It's not yet over. But I mean, it's how many days to the end of March?
Yeah.
And we still don't have any certainty. And, you know, the threat of price at the pump might increase again. Dangote is importing so much crude now. He's also exporting even finished goods. What that would do to the supply and the seemingly peace we seem to have had for a couple of months now. That's another thing that is being threatening economic activities and Nigerians. Yeah,
I mean, you're not wrong about that. And to an extent, I would say the noise around it all is what the markets are perceiving and reacting on. And it's very much expected. But I would say it's not yet over, simply because these conversations are ongoing. And we all know that the stakeholders are aware of the broader implications of these conversations to the general public, right? So I would say that in terms of the entire noise around it all and the conversations ongoing, I would say we will just have to wait and see where those conversations eventually land. But looking at the implications of what this noise right now is causing, we do see that it's beginning to somewhat impact economic activities, because there's some level of, you know, panic going on in the market. We're already seeing petrol prices at some pumps marginally increase, and people are beginning to, you know, feel the impact of that. So those are one of the things I would say that the noise is currently causing. But broadly, we also need to look at it from the market and the transactional aspect when you're dissecting the entire Naira for crude deal. In itself, it was it was a development that was supposed to, number one, ensure that Dangote and other refineries that have come up that are now resuscitated, right, within the Nigerian economy, ensuring that they have access to crude oil at equitable prices, right? So what this meant was they had access to crude oil from the NNPC. They're able to refine at stable costs to ensure that Nigerians have access to refined petroleum products steadily, right? But with the fact that the deal is somewhat stalling, what that means is that petrol supply, that obviously there are concerns around that. But I do think that right now, all stakeholders, including Dangote and the NNPC and other refineries, will do what they can to ensure that petrol supply is stabilized. On the pricing aspect, yes, on the pricing aspect, that's where I was going to go into the more transactional aspect of it. It's important for us to know that right now, because we're operating in a deregulated petrol price market, the trends of global oil prices are what we would use to gauge the trend of domestic prices. So whether or not the crude was purchased in Naira or purchased in the US dollar, if global oil prices are higher, that is a better gauge for us now to really check what domestic prices will trend at. Of course, we are hoping for a world where supply is stable, petrol prices are stable, and petrol prices even go down. But the reality of the transactional aspect of this deal is that we are operating in a different market structure. And what that means is that the trend of global oil prices will significantly determine the trend of domestic oil prices.
Yeah, but maybe that's sometimes difficult to connect in Nigeria. Yeah. For instance, in the US, it's kind of direct. You know, you know what the global oil price, crude price is, and you see it reflects at the pump.
Yes.
But in Nigeria, perhaps we're not used to it, but my fear is we don't wake up one day and hear, oh, there's still subsidies somewhere. Because we see movement in the global oil space, and we haven't seen it reflect back home. either up or down. We did see Brent go down to less than 70. Now it's back to about 73 and all of that. I know there are contracts for about 2 months and all of that, but it doesn't seem like we are really there in a deregulated market yet. We're still dealing with our issues as Nigeria, and that is kind of scary. So we don't wake up and go back to where we're supposed to be coming from, which is the era of subsidy.
So I completely understand the sentiments, but I think that when changing market structure, right, happens the way ours happened somewhat overnight, right, there will still be teething pains, and I think that that's where we are now. Right? We don't expect that all of the deregulation activities, everything is going to be as direct as possible. But more importantly, speaking to the connection of global oil prices and what is happening in the domestic commodities market, right? We do know that by the time you purchase crude oil, right, say from the global market, of which Dangote has been doing, even with the existence of the Naira for crude deal for however long it lasted up until the contract going to be, renewed or not renewed by the end of March. We do know that Dangote has been buying from countries like Angola, buying from the US even as well. So what that means is that you buy at the US dollar prices, you're going to bring it into Nigeria, taking into consideration the custom duties, taking into consideration the import duties. And remember, crude oil, unlike other commodities, you have to transport it. Most of the time, it's just being transported by sea. So you have to also take into consideration the freight cost, take into consideration the landing cost. So there are many other costs that make up the eventual price of the crude oil in Nigeria, not just the global oil price. But in terms of direction of prices, the global crude oil prices are a good benchmark to determine the trend and direction of domestic crude oil prices. But the eventual price of what we will buy it as, global commodity price, global oil prices cannot, do not do that, because there are logistics involved, there's conversion involved, there's landing cost involved, there's offloading from the ships now to the tankers. There's a lot involved, costs that have to be catered for, right? And those are the things that determine the eventual price we buy at. But in terms of the deregulation and how the markets have been perceiving and how we've received it, I will say to an extent, and from the beginning of the year, we have seen that some more play out. There was a time, at least twice since the beginning of the year, petrol prices have been reduced, right? And those were, in fact, coinciding with times where the global crude oil prices also fell. So now that global crude oil prices are rising, the expectation is that domestic petrol prices are also going to rise. Where I think there is a gap, again, like we had initially spoken about, is the communication to the general public. People do not really know why they go to the pump price today. It is 670, and tomorrow they go back, it's 675. So where we need to do a lot more work is to ensure that people understand the dynamics of the market that they're now functioning in. I've mentioned that, yes, we still have teething pains, and those teething pains are going to remain for a while. They're going to remain for a while, but more importantly, it's important that we understand that desensitization of general public is extremely important, so they understand the markets that they're now functioning in.
It sounds like you still have a whole lot of work to do.
Yes, we still do, because we're coming from a world where there was a lot of backlog, there was a lot of conversations that were not had. People didn't understand what was going on. And we're now in a world where we're forced to have those conversations. So it will take some time.
So we have to do it fast.
Very quickly,
but
yes.
all of this, I mean, at the end of the day, for the average man out there, is how does this affect the price of my day-to-day consumption? Looking at commodities prices. When I know I had a conversation on a decline of commodities prices, and somebody told me, no, that's not true. There's nothing like commodity prices are falling. It's still high up there. What has FDC found?
I mean, we're still seeing mixed trends in commodity prices, but overall, it's obvious that prices are still very high, right? People are still feeling the pain of high bag of rice being expensive, a Congo of rice being expensive, tomato prices being high, and you cannot take that experience away from them. It's the reality of people's experiences. And like I always say, it's extremely important for us to go back to figure out what exactly these issues are. And I think we're already aware. We just need things to start changing in that regard. We know that agricultural productivity is one of the biggest issues that are currently affecting commodity prices in Nigeria today. So what are we doing in that regard to ensure that at a national level, food prices are stable? We're able to produce food round the year and ensure that they are equitably distributed across the nation. And
Because post-harvest loss is a reality.
It's a reality.
About 50%.
Exactly, for most commodities that we consume on a daily basis, right? So addressing those issues, until we begin to address them, I don't think that the reality of domestic commodity price significantly declining to what people were enjoying pre-pandemic, pre-Russia-Ukraine war will pre-reforms will be a reality right now. So in the short term, at least, for the near 2-3 months, people will still experience this squeeze in disposable income, especially because income levels are not rising as fast.
Yeah, it can't rise. Where would it be coming from? Well, I guess the Minister of Agriculture, I mean, we've tried to befriend him so much on this program, but it doesn't. Now I see him in many events, you know, and all of that. Minister, we're still waiting for you on Business Morning. Minister of Agriculture, we see you now at events, but we would like to talk to you about some of the strategies, you know, that you're putting in place, so that even if we're buying food or commodities at an expensive rate now, can we have the promise that by the end of the year, because of this plan, we're going to have soft landing, especially during Christmas, you know, the end of the year. Minister, Business Morning would like to talk to you. For the 100th time, we're invited. But thank you so much, Dumebi Oluwole, Senior Associate with Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.